The conference chamber aboard Station Harmony had been designed to make visitors feel small. The walls stretched up so high that Jake Morrison had to tilt his head back just to see the ceiling. Everything sparkled with strange alien lights that hurt his eyes if he looked too long. The Galactic Council members sat on raised platforms that forced humans to look up at them, like children staring at adults. Jake knew this was done on purpose. It was meant to remind everyone who had the power here. Commander Jake Morrison stood in the center of the massive room wearing his best uniform. Next to him stood Ambassador Lisa Grant. She looked calm on the outside, but Jake could see the tension in her shoulders. They had been negotiating for 14 hours straight without any real break. The Alien Council members did not seem tired at all. They just kept making demands and refusing to listen to anything the human delegation said. The Creathian High Arbiter looked like a giant metal insect with 6 arms. He waved one of those arms like he was swatting away a fly. His voice came out in a strange clicking sound that the translator turned into cold, emotionless words. He told Lisa that humans would accept the new territorial terms. He said that human expansion into the outer sectors had been premature and broke the rules. He did not ask. He simply stated it like it was already decided. Jake watched Lisa grip her datapad tighter. He knew what she was thinking about. Over the past 2 years, the Creathians had attacked 17 human colonies. 17 worlds that humans had found empty and lifeless. Humans had spent decades turning those dead rocks into living, breathing places where families could build homes and start new lives. Now the Council wanted humanity to just give them up. They called it the price for peace. Lisa took a breath and spoke carefully. She reminded the High Arbiter that those worlds had been completely uninhabited when humans arrived. She said humans had followed every single rule laid out in the concorded agreements. She tried to explain that humanity had done nothing wrong. The High Arbiter cut her off before she could finish. A huge reptile creature named Counselor Vexthor leaned forward on his platform. His species had ruled 3 entire sectors of space for thousands of years. He told Lisa that those protocols were written before humans even had spaceships. He said humans forgot their place in the galaxy. He reminded everyone that humans had only been traveling between stars for 200 years, while his people had maintained order for 200,000 years. His tone made it clear he thought humans were nothing more than annoying children who needed to be put in their place. A wave of agreement moved through the council chamber. 37 different alien species filled the room and represented hundreds of worlds. Not one single voice spoke up to defend humanity. They all just sat there nodding along like humanity deserved this treatment. Jake could not stay quiet anymore. He stepped forward and asked permission to speak. The military officer wanted to address the council directly. The High Arbiter seemed amused by this. He told Jake to go ahead and speak. The way he said it made Jake feel like the alien was humoring a small child. Jake kept his voice steady and strong. He said that humans came to this station in good faith seeking real peace. He explained that the human delegation had offered many compromises during these long negotiations. Humans had agreed to buffer zones between territories. They had accepted trade restrictions. They had even agreed to limits on how many military ships they could build. But now the Council was asking humans to abandon their own citizens. Jake stated clearly that 18 million people lived on those colony worlds. Those were human families with children and dreams and lives. Humanity would not leave them behind to be ruled by the Creathians who had already attacked them. Vexthor leaned even further forward. His teeth showed in what might have been a smile but looked more like a threat. He asked if Jake was refusing the Council's terms. Lisa raised her hand to speak again. She tried to ask for more time to discuss other options. Maybe there was a middle ground they had not explored yet. The High Arbiter interrupted her again. He said there were no other options to discuss. The Creathian Dominion had claimed those sectors using ancient rites that existed long before humans had even discovered fire. The Council had made their ruling. Humans would obey or humans would face the consequences. His tone left no room for argument or discussion. The entire chamber went silent. Jake looked over at Lisa. In her eyes, he saw her doing the same calculations he was doing in his head. The humans were outgunned badly. They were outpositioned. They were out of options. The smart thing to do would be to ask for another break. Call back to Earth for new instructions. Stall for more time. Maybe find some angle they had missed, but sometimes doing the smart thing was not the same as doing the right thing. Lisa straightened her back and reached for the Human Sovereignty Charter, sitting on the table in front of her. That document represented 3 months of exhausting negotiations. It contained dozens of compromises that humans had agreed to. It was humanity's best hope for a peaceful resolution to this crisis. Everyone in the room had spent weeks arguing over every single word in that charter. Lisa picked it up with both hands. Then she tore it in half right down the middle. The sound of ripping paper echoed through the crystal chamber like a gunshot. Shocked gasps came from the gallery where other alien observers sat watching. Several council members stood up from their seats in surprise. No one had expected this. Lisa's voice rang out clear and unwavering. She announced that the human delegation was withdrawing from these negotiations immediately. She said that humans came here seeking peace as equals. Instead, the council had treated them like beggars asking for scraps from the table. She looked directly at the High Arbiter and said that humans were done begging. The High Arbiter's voice shook with fury. He asked how Lisa dared to do this. He demanded to know if she understood that she was risking war with the entire Galactic Council. Jake moved to stand right beside Lisa. His hand rested on the weapon at his hip. He was not threatening anyone. He was just making a statement. He told the council that humans had faced extinction twice before in their history. Humanity was still here. The question the council should be asking themselves was whether they really wanted to find out why humans had survived when so many others had not. Lisa gathered up her remaining materials from the table. Jake followed her toward the exit. Their footsteps rang against the polished floor. Behind them, the council chamber erupted into chaos. Dozens of alien voices overlapped in different languages. Some sounded angry. Others sounded shocked. A few sounded almost frightened. As Lisa and Jake reached the doorway, Vexathor's booming voice cut through the noise. He shouted that humans would regret this decision. He promised that humanity would be quarantined. Their expansion would be halted. Their trade routes would be blockaded. He said humans would come crawling back within a cycle begging for mercy. Lisa stopped walking and looked back over her shoulder. She met Vexthor's eyes directly and said simply that no, they really would not. The massive doors sealed behind them with a heavy sound that felt final. As they walked down the corridor toward their shuttle, Lisa allowed herself a small smile. She admitted quietly that tearing up that charter had felt good. Jake agreed. Then he said that now came the hard part. Lisa asked if he meant war. Jake nodded. He said he meant surviving what they had just started. The USS Defiant hung in orbit high above Earth with its weapon systems powered down according to the rules for ships near the home planet. Captain Nicole Hayes stood on the bridge watching the tactical display screens that showed her where every ship in the area was located. Her crew worked quietly at their stations, monitoring everything that happened in the space around them. Lieutenant Chris Bennett sat at the tactical station tracking incoming ships. He suddenly reported that 7 Krethian cruisers had just appeared at the edge of the solar system. They were broadcasting messages on every frequency demanding that Earth acknowledge the Council's blockade. They wanted human ships to submit to inspection protocols immediately. Nicole looked over at her executive officer, Commander Paul Martinez. He had served with her for 8 years and could usually tell what she was thinking before she said it out loud. Paul asked quietly if they were actually going to submit to the alien demands. Nicole said not a chance. She ordered the helm officer to turn the ship toward the moon at full speed. She told Chris to start calculating attack patterns on those cruisers. She wanted to know every weak point in their formation and the best way to hit them hard. Chris reminded her that their orders were to avoid any fighting. Nicole corrected him firmly. She said their orders were to defend Earth. If those Krethian ships moved past the boundary into human-controlled space, they would become enemy targets. The bridge went quiet as everyone understood what that meant. They were preparing for war. For 2 weeks since the failed peace negotiations, humanity had been getting ready for this exact moment. Every military ship had been called back to defend human space. Defensive positions had been set up around important locations. Factories were running day and night building weapons and supplies at levels not seen since the colony wars decades ago. But preparing for war and actually fighting one were very different things. The Krethian Dominion commanded a fleet of over 3,000 warships. Humanity could barely put together 600 ships, and that count included every small patrol boat and outdated frigate still in service. The numbers were not in humanity's favor at all. Ensign Danny Wright at the communications station announced that Fleet Command was requesting a secure conference with all ship commanders in the system. Nicole told him to put Admiral Rodriguez through to her ready room. She told Paul that he was in command of the bridge. If those Krethian cruisers advanced even 1 meter past the boundary, Paul had permission to open fire. Paul nodded with a grim expression. He understood the weight of that order. In her private ready room, Nicole activated the holographic display. Admiral Carlos Rodriguez appeared along with 9 other captains commanding various ships of Earth's home fleet. The admiral looked exhausted, like he had not slept in days. He probably had not. Carlos did not waste time with pleasantries. He asked for status reports from everyone. He explained that the council had made their move. 7 ships sat at their doorstep. 40 more were gathering at the Proxima relay point. Reports were coming in of Krethian fleet movements near all the major human colonies. The council was going to make an example of humanity to show the rest of the galaxy what happened when someone defied them. Captain Helen Price of the USS Valiant growled that the aliens should try it. She said humans had home advantage and more firepower than the Krethians expected. Captain Steve Morrison of the transport carrier Endeavour disagreed. He pointed out that 18 million citizens lived on colonies that humanity could not defend properly. Those people needed evacuation plans, Nicole spoke up. She said that if humans evacuated those worlds, they would lose them forever. She reminded everyone that humanity had told the council they would not abandon their people. They needed to mean what they said. Carlos nodded slowly. He agreed, but said that meant humanity needed to send a strong message. Something that would make the Krethians think twice about pressing their blockade. He asked Nicole for her assessment since her ship was closest to the alien advance fleet. Nicole pulled up her tactical data and shared it with everyone. She explained that 7 cruisers were arranged in a standard patrol formation. They were clearly expecting humans to either back down or maybe put up weak resistance. They were not ready for a real fight at all. Carlos asked if Nicole wanted to engage them directly. Nicole clarified her plan. She wanted to bloody their nose. Not destroy them completely, but hit them hard enough to hurt. Make it absolutely clear that humans were not prey to be hunted. She would strike them with everything she had, and then break contact before their reinforcements could arrive. It would show the Krethians that attacking human ships came with a very high price. The other captains exchanged uncertain glances. This was the critical moment. This decision would determine whether humanity's defiance at the peace talks had been just empty words or genuine resolve backed by action. Captain Steve warned that the council would call a direct attack an act of war. Nicole pointed out that the Krethians had already declared a blockade of sovereign human territory. That was an act of war by any reasonable definition. Humans would just be responding appropriately. Carlos sat quietly for a long moment. The burden of command showed clearly in his tired eyes. Finally, he straightened up in his chair. He ordered all ships to prepare for combat operations. He gave Nicole direct authorization to engage the Krethian advance fleet. His orders were to hit them fast and hard, then fall back to defensive positions near the moon. He said it was time to show the galaxy that humans did not make empty threats. The conference ended, and Nicole returned to the bridge. Paul looked up as she entered and waited for orders. Nicole ordered the ship to go to Condition 1. All hands were to report to battle stations immediately. She announced that they were about to make history. The alarm klaxons began to wail throughout the ship. That sound was one that humanity had hoped never to hear again. But as the Defiant surged forward with its weapons coming online and the crew moving with practiced efficiency, Nicole felt something unexpected. She did not feel afraid. She felt proud. Humanity had walked away from the peace negotiations with dignity and tact. Now they would prove that their courage was not just diplomatic theater or empty posturing. It was real. It was written in steel and determination, and the willingness to fight for what was right. The 7 Krethian cruisers waiting at the boundary had just made the biggest mistake of their existence. They had assumed humanity would fold under pressure. They believed that the threat of overwhelming force would bring immediate compliance and submission. They were about to learn the most important rule about dealing with humans. When you pushed humans hard enough, they did not break. They did not surrender. They pushed back twice as hard. Nicole studied the enemy formation on her screens. The Krethians sat there confidently in their superior numbers. They had no idea what was coming. She smiled coldly. In a few minutes they would understand. In a few minutes the entire galaxy would understand that humanity meant every word they had said. The Defiant accelerated toward the enemy fleet. Its crew was ready. Its weapons were charged. and its captain was absolutely determined to teach the Galactic Council a lesson they would never forget. The age of pushing humanity around was over. The age of treating humans as equals was about to begin, whether the Council liked it or not. The bridge of the Krethian cruiser. Devourer vibrated with a low humming sound that made the crew feel comfortable during long space journeys. Fleet Commander Zarkoth watched his tactical display as the small human vessel approached his position. His insect-like mandibles clicked together in what his species did when they found something amusing. One tiny ship was heading straight towards 7 of his powerful cruisers. The tactical officer reported that the human ship was accelerating directly toward them. Its weapons were charging up and powering on. Zarkoth told his crew to let the humans come closer. He saw no threat in one vessel against 7. He thought human bravery was actually just stupidity. On the bridge of the Defiant, Nicole watched the distance counter ticking down steadily, 50,000 kilometers away, then 40,000. The Krethian ships held their formation without moving. They were confident in their numerical advantage. That confidence was about to cost them dearly. Nicole ordered Chris to target the lead cruiser's shield generators specifically. She wanted a full spread of quantum torpedoes fired at once. Her plan was to knock down their shields before they even realized what was happening. Chris reported that his firing solution was locked and ready. Nicole gave the order to fire. The Defiant shuddered as 16 torpedoes launched in rapid succession. Each one carried enough destructive force to look like a tiny sun. The weapons streaked across the empty space, leaving bright trails of ionized particles behind them. Zarkoth's amusement disappeared instantly as his shield indicators flashed red warnings. He started to order evasive maneuvers, but it was already too late. The first torpedo slammed into Devourer's forward shields. The second and third torpedoes hit microseconds later. The effect was immediate and devastating. Shields designed to withstand normal weapons buckled and collapsed under the focused quantum bombardment. The tactical officer reported with panic in his voice that shields were failing completely. Structural integrity was compromised on multiple decks. The ship was taking real damage. Nicole did not give the Krethians any time to recover from the first strike. She ordered the helm to go to full speed using attack pattern Delta 7. She wanted the Defiant to cross directly in front of the enemy bow. She told Chris to prepare the pulse cannons and fire on her command. The Defiant streaked forward, moving much faster than a ship of its size should be able to move. Its smaller profile made it a very difficult target as it wove between the Krethian ships. The pulse cannons opened fire, sending blue-white energy beams raking across the wounded cruiser's hull. The beams punched clean through armor plating that had been rated as impervious to human weapons technology. Zarkoth could barely believe what he was seeing. He whispered that it was impossible. His intelligence reports had said that human weapons were decades behind Krethian technology. Those reports had clearly been completely wrong. What Zarkoth did not know was that humanity had spent the past 2 years secretly upgrading every single ship in the fleet. The knowledge that they were surrounded by potentially hostile alien powers had driven human innovation forward at an incredible pace. Engineers had worked day and night developing new weapons and defensive systems. Chris announced that a second Krethian cruiser was firing at them. Nicole calmly ordered evasive maneuvers and told him to return fire. She wanted him to target their engines. The Defiant rolled smoothly, letting the enemy plasma bolt streak harmlessly past the ship. Then it looped back around with an agility that should have been physically impossible for a vessel of its size. More torpedoes launched from the Defiant. These were aimed precisely at the second cruiser's propulsion systems. Multiple explosions lit up the darkness of space like a string of dying stars. Chris reported with satisfaction that the target's engines were completely destroyed. The enemy cruiser was now drifting helplessly without power. Paul warned that 3 more cruisers were moving to engage. They were trying to surround the Defiant and trap it using their superior numbers. Nicole studied the tactical display carefully. Her mind raced through calculations of vectors and firing solutions and enemy capabilities. The Krethians were adapting to the situation. They were trying to use their numbers to box in the faster human ship. It was time to show them another surprise. Nicole ordered the deployment of Drone Package Alpha. She wanted a full spread and defensive pattern. A dozen small devices shot out from the Defiant's launch tubes. Each one began broadcasting a sensor signature that was identical to the ship itself. To the Krethian targeting systems, it suddenly looked like one human vessel had become 13 separate targets. Zarkoth watched his tactical display dissolve into complete chaos. He demanded to know which signature was the real ship. His tactical officer worked frantically at his console but could not determine which target was real. He reported that human electronic countermeasures were unlike anything in their database. The Crethians did exactly what prey animals do when they get confused and frightened. They fired at everything. Plasma bolts and antimatter missiles filled the space around the Defiant. The weapons chased ghost targets while the real ship slipped through the chaos completely untouched. Nicole commanded one more attack pass before breaking for home. She told her crew to give the Crethians something they would remember for a very long time. The Defiant's main railgun charged to full power. The Crethians had dismissed this weapon system as primitive human technology. That was another mistake. At point-blank range, the railgun projectile moved at 30% the speed of light. It carried kinetic energy that made nuclear weapons look weak by comparison. The tungsten slug punched straight through the third cruiser's shields. It went through the armor plating. It smashed through internal bulkheads and compartments. It exited out the far side of the ship in a spray of debris and frozen atmosphere. The cruiser began a slow, uncontrolled tumble as secondary explosions rippled along its damaged hull. Nicole ordered them to break off the attack immediately. She told the helm to give her maximum burn toward lunar orbit. The Defiant's engines flared brilliant blue as the ship accelerated away from the battle. Behind it, 3 of the 7 Crethian cruisers were either completely destroyed or crippled beyond repair. A 4th cruiser was listing badly with major damage. The remaining 3 ships were scattered and disorganized. The entire engagement had lasted exactly 4 minutes and 37 seconds. In his damaged flagship, Zarkoth stared at the destruction displayed on his screens. Horror slowly dawned in his mind. He had been a fleet commander for 40 years. He had fought in 7 major military campaigns. Never once had he witnessed such precise and brutal efficiency in combat. He ordered his communications officer to open a priority channel to Council Command. They needed to know immediately what had just happened here. The officer asked what he should tell them. Zarkoth watched the human ship disappear into the sensor clutter near Earth's moon. The crew aboard that ship was probably celebrating their victory right now. He told the communications officer to inform the council that they had been wrong about everything. Tell them that humans were not a minor irritation to be easily swatted aside. He paused as his mandibles clicked in an expression that his species used to show grim respect for a worthy opponent. He said to tell the council that they had just picked a fight with real warriors. Warriors who knew how to hit hard and fight smart. Warriors who would not be intimidated or conquered easily. The message needed to be clear. Humanity was not going to back down. This was only the beginning. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened within hours of the Defiant's devastating attack. The crystalline chamber filled quickly with agitated representatives from dozens of different species. The High Arbiter called for order, but even his own composure had been badly shaken by the reports flooding in from the border zones. Nobody had expected humans to fight back so effectively. Ambassador Trelvix of the Vorian Collective spoke first. His species was known throughout the galaxy for their strategic thinking and military planning. He stated the facts plainly. 3 cruisers had been destroyed and 1 heavily damaged, all by a single human vessel. This was no longer a simple quarantine action. The humans had demonstrated military capability, far beyond what any projection or intelligence report had predicted. Councillor Vex Thor argued that the Crethians had simply been caught by surprise. He insisted it was just one battle and not a full war. His confident demeanor had cracked noticeably, but he still tried to maintain his position of strength. Trelvix countered that one battle had already shifted calculations across the entire galaxy. He activated a holographic display showing territorial maps and political alignments. In the 14 days since humans had withdrawn from negotiations, 17 minor species had lodged formal protests about the blockade. 4 members of their trade consortium were openly questioning whether the Council's actions had been justified. The humans had become a symbol that other species were watching very carefully. Councillor Hresh asked what kind of symbol humans represented. His crystalline form glowed with agitation. His species valued order and stability above all else, and this chaos disturbed them deeply. Ambassador Keisha of the Meridian Union answered the question. Her feathered crest was raised high in a sign of agitation among her people. She said humans had become a symbol of defiance. For thousands of years, the Council had operated on the assumption that younger species would simply accept their place in the established hierarchy. Humans had rejected that assumption completely. Now other species across the galaxy were watching to see what would happen next. The High Arbiter's compound eyes swept across the entire assembly. He asked if the Council was seriously suggesting they back down and show weakness before a species that had been traveling between stars for barely 2 centuries. Keisha replied very carefully. She suggested that perhaps the Council needed to reconsider their entire approach to this situation. The humans had offered numerous compromises during the original negotiations. The Council had rejected every single one because they assumed humans had no choice but to accept whatever terms were dictated. That assumption had proven very costly in both ships' incredibility. Earth far below the political drama happening in space. Jake Morrison sat in the Strategic Command bunker, located 3 kilometers beneath the Rocky Mountains. Around the conference table sat the leadership of humanity's military forces and civilian government. They were watching the same intelligence feeds that had reached the Galactic Council. President Linda Foster had been elected just 6 months earlier on a platform of peaceful galactic integration. She looked like she had aged 10 years since taking office. She asked Jake to tell her honestly whether humanity could sustain this level of conflict. She needed to know if the Defiant's victory had been just a lucky punch before the Council knocked humanity out completely. Jake studied the reports coming in from fleet commanders stationed across all of human-controlled space. He told the president that the Defiant's victory had not been luck at all. It had been carefully calculated. Humanity had spent 2 full years preparing for exactly this scenario. Every ship had been upgraded with new technology. Every captain had been drilled extensively on tactics specifically designed to counter Council military forces. Humanity could not win a prolonged war of attrition against such overwhelming numbers, but they could make any victory the Council achieved so costly that they would think twice about continuing. Secretary of Defense Gary Holland pointed out that making something costly was not the same as actually winning a war. Admiral Rodriguez joined the conversation via secure communications link from his position in lunar orbit. He agreed that humanity could not win a traditional war, but said the situation had changed the basic equation. The Council had expected easy compliance and quick submission. Instead, they got bloodied badly. Now they had to make a difficult decision about whether enforcing their will was actually worth the cost in ships and lives and political capital. Linda leaned back heavily in her chair. She asked if the strategy was simply to wait and see if the Council would give up first. Jake said not exactly. He pulled up another display showing detailed analysis of Council politics and internal dynamics. Humanity had been studying the Council for decades. They were not actually a unified entity at all. They were a coalition held together by mutual economic benefit and the carefully maintained illusion of invincibility. Humanity had just shattered that illusion completely. Now they needed to exploit the cracks that were starting to appear. Linda asked how they could do that. A new voice entered the conversation as Ambassador Lisa Grant appeared on one of the video screens. She was transmitting from an undisclosed location for security reasons. She said the answer was to make allies. Not every species in the Council had supported the blockade. Some had voted for it out of fear. Others had voted yes simply out of habit. But several species had abstained from voting, and a few had actually voted against the blockade entirely. Those species were potential friends who might be willing to help humanity. Gary pointed out that the Council had strict rules forbidding member states from conducting independent diplomacy with quarantined species. It was explicitly against their laws. Lisa smiled at that objection. She said that was exactly why humanity would not be approaching them through official channels. She asked President Foster for authorization to conduct secret back-channel communications with sympathetic Council members. Everything would be off the record and completely deniable, but it would open doors to future cooperation and support. Linda looked at Jake, who nodded his agreement. He said it was sound strategy on multiple levels. Humanity needed more than just military victories. They desperately needed political leverage and allies within the Council structure itself. Linda gave her authorization but warned Lisa to be extremely careful. If the Council discovered what she was doing, the consequences could be severe. Lisa's smile turned grim. She pointed out that the Council could hardly quarantine humanity any harder than they already were. Humanity was already at war whether they wanted to admit it or not. Now they were just fighting that war on multiple fronts using every tool available. Back in the council chamber, the debate had grown increasingly heated. Vexthor was demanding an immediate and overwhelming military response. He wanted a show of such massive force that it would crush human resistance completely and restore council authority across the galaxy. But other council members were far less certain about that approach. The economic impacts of a full-scale war were becoming painfully apparent. Human trade routes connected 17 different star systems. Shutting them down had disrupted supply chains across multiple sectors of space. Insurance rates for commercial shipping had tripled in the affected regions. Perhaps most concerning was that 3 different species had quietly approached human colonies with offers of continued trade, despite the council blockade. The High Arbiter raised his appendages demanding silence. He asked Vexthor directly what deploying 200 warships to enforce the blockade would actually achieve. Vexthor declared confidently that it would result in complete human capitulation within 2 cycles. He insisted humans could not possibly stand against such overwhelming force. Trelvix interjected with a different perspective. He suggested that perhaps humans would simply bloody the council forces even further. Every battle made humans seem stronger and made the council seem weaker. There was an alternative approach worth considering. The High Arbiter asked what alternative Trelvix had in mind. Trelvix proposed actual negotiation. Real negotiation where both sides were treated as equals, not the dictation of terms that the council had attempted before. Humans wanted recognition as equals in the galactic community. Perhaps the council should seriously consider whether denying them that status was actually worth the cost of enforcing that denial. The chamber erupted into loud argument. Species shouted at each other in dozens of different languages. For the first time in the council's long history, the outcome of a major decision was genuinely uncertain. Nobody knew which way things would go, and in that uncertainty, humanity found something more valuable than military victory. They found real leverage that could change everything. 6 weeks had passed since the Battle of the Heliopause, and the Galactic Council faced a reality they had never anticipated. They were stuck in a stalemate with humanity, and nothing was going according to their plans. Human colonies throughout the disputed sectors had transformed themselves into military strongpoints. Civilian settlements now bristled with defensive weapons and shield generators. The expected collapse of human resistance had not happened at all. Instead, 3 more skirmishes had resulted in council ships being damaged or destroyed, while human casualties remained surprisingly light. Every engagement proved that humans knew exactly how to fight and win. The true shock came from a direction the council had never expected. The High Arbiter stared at the message displayed before him. He read it for the 3rd time as if reading it again would somehow change the words. Beside him, Vexthor's rage had finally burned itself out into stunned silence. The High Arbiter spoke quietly. He said that the Meridian Union had withdrawn all their forces from blockade enforcement. They cited economic concerns and serious questions about the legal justification for the Council's actions against humanity. Vexthor hissed that they were traitors. He started to say the Council should punish them, but Trelvix interrupted him. Trelvix entered the chamber with unusual formality. He said the Meridian Union was not alone in their decision. The Vorian Collective was also withdrawing its military forces from the blockade. He had been authorized to inform the Council that 17 other member species were formally requesting a complete review of the human quarantine under the Concordate's official dispute resolution protocols. The High Arbiter's compound eyes fixed on Trelvix with something approaching disbelief. He pointed out that Trelvix's own species had led the charge for this blockade. The Vorian Collective had provided the intelligence assessments that justified the entire action against humanity. Trelvix replied evenly that he was now providing updated assessments based on new information. The humans were far more capable than anyone had projected in both military matters and diplomatic relations. Ambassador Lisa Grant had established communication channels with 14 different species over the past 6 weeks. She was offering them trade agreements and technology exchanges and mutual defense pacts. She had accomplished in 6 weeks what normally took most species decades to achieve. On Earth, Lisa Grant sat across a table from Ambassador Keisha in a neutral space station that technically did not exist on any official star charts. The Meridian diplomat's feathered crest was lowered in a gesture that her species used to show respect. Keisha said that Lisa's people had impressed many council members. Not just with their military prowess, though that had certainly been noteworthy. What impressed people was humanity's diplomatic flexibility. Humans had walked away from negotiations when treated unjustly. Yet they had immediately reached out to potential allies rather than simply preparing for total war. That showed real wisdom. Lisa replied that humans had a lot of practice with this kind of situation. Humanity had fought wars among themselves for thousands of years. They had learned through bitter experience that most conflicts could be resolved without total war, but only if both sides were willing to negotiate in good faith. Keisha acknowledged that the council had not been negotiating in good faith at all. They had treated humanity as supplicants rather than equals. That had been a serious mistake. Several council members, including herself, had tried to prevent it, but they had been outvoted. Lisa leaned forward and asked Keisha to help humanity correct that mistake. Formal trade agreements between the Meridian Union and human colonies would completely undercut the blockade's effectiveness. Other species would follow the Meridian lead once they saw it was safe. Keisha said with what might have been a smile that it was already done. Meridian merchant fleets had begun approaching human colonies 3 days ago. The council had not interfered, likely because they understood that attempting to enforce the blockade against their own member species would fracture council authority completely. Lisa asked what happened now. Keisha explained that now the council would realize what humans had understood from the very beginning. Power without legitimacy was incredibly fragile. The council could demand obedience, but they could not command genuine respect. Humans had walked away from the council's negotiating table. In doing so, they had revealed that the council's table was not the only place where galactic politics happened. 3 days later, a formal council session took place that was unlike any in recent memory. The chamber was half empty. Many species had sent only junior representatives rather than their primary ambassadors. The message was absolutely clear. The council's authority had been badly damaged, and perhaps irreparably so. The High Arbiter began the proceedings with unusual humility in his voice. He acknowledged that the quarantine of human space had proven both economically disruptive and politically divisive. The council had received a new communication from the human government, delivered through intermediary channels. He said he would now read it for the NT. Reassembly. He activated the holographic display. President Linda Foster's image appeared. The message was recorded, but it carried the full weight of official communication from Earth's government. Linda began by addressing the Galactic Council directly. She said that humanity did not seek conflict with any species or governing body. Humans had walked away from negotiations because they could not accept terms that completely disregarded their sovereignty and the welfare of their citizens. However, humanity remained fully committed to peaceful coexistence and mutually beneficial cooperation with all species throughout the galaxy. She paused to let that statement sink in before continuing with her proposal. She said humanity wanted a new framework for integrating into galactic civilization. First, the Council needed to recognize human sovereignty over all colonies established in accordance with concordant protocols, including the disputed outer sector worlds. Second, humanity wanted membership in the Galactic Council as equals, with full voting rights and participation in governance. Third, she proposed a comprehensive trade and technology exchange program that would benefit all parties involved. Linda explained what humanity would offer in exchange. Humanity committed to respecting Council protocols for any future expansion. They would participate in collective security arrangements. They would contribute actively to galactic stability. Humans offered their advanced defensive technologies and their economic productivity and their diplomatic efforts to strengthen the galactic order, not undermine it. Linda's expression hardened slightly as she delivered the final part of her message. She said this offer was made in complete good faith and with genuine desire for peace, but it was absolutely not made from any position of weakness. The past weeks had clearly demonstrated that humanity could not be forced into compliance through military action. However, humans could be persuaded toward cooperation if they were treated with the respect that any sovereign species deserved. The message ended, and the council chamber fell into heavy silence. Everyone understood the implications. Vexthor finally spoke, though his voice lacked all its earlier certainty. He said humans were demanding everything they had wanted initially, but now from a position of strength. He called it unacceptable. Trelvix asked a simple question. Was it really unacceptable? Humans were asking for what they had been prepared to negotiate for originally. fair treatment and recognition as equals. The council had refused because they assumed humans had no choice but to accept whatever terms were offered. That assumption had been proven completely wrong. The real question now was whether the council would compound that error by continuing a conflict that had already cost them credibility and economic stability and political unity. The debate raged for many hours, but the eventual outcome was becoming clear to everyone present. The council could continue the blockade, but without unified support from member species, enforcement would be impossible. They could escalate to full military action, but the costs in ships and lives and political damage would be enormous. Or they could accept what many were quietly admitting should have been offered from the very start: respect for humanity as equals. 2 weeks later, Ambassador Lisa Grant returned to Station Harmony. This time she came not as a supplicant begging for terms, but as a negotiating partner with real power. The chamber still stretched impossibly high overhead, but somehow it seemed much less imposing than before. The High Arbiter addressed her directly, and his tone was noticeably different from their last encounter. He said that the Galactic Council had reviewed humanity's proposal carefully. They were prepared to discuss terms. Lisa allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. She said that was excellent news. Before negotiations began, she wanted to inform the Council that she was authorized to establish a permanent human embassy here at Station Harmony. She was also pleased to announce that 16 species had already expressed strong interest in establishing formal diplomatic relations with Earth. She set down a datapad containing the new human sovereignty charter, not torn this time but whole, and backed by the leverage that humanity had earned through courage and competence and refusal to be bullied. Lisa asked if they should begin. She emphasized the word equals. The High Arbiter's pause was brief but very significant. He agreed that they would negotiate as equals. Humanity had walked away from peace negotiations not out of pride or foolishness, but because they understood a fundamental truth. Peace without dignity was merely subjugation wearing a different name. And if there was one thing humanity would never accept, it was being subject to anyone else's rule. The Galactic Council had learned this lesson the hard way. In the years to come, they would discover that having humans as allies was far more valuable than having them as conquered subjects could ever have been.